Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so excited that you have popped back on. I am going to be talking again about Dee's Odyssey of Prayer. We have had some amazing things happen. I'm so grateful. God is so, so good. And I hope for me that as I continue on this Odyssey that the Holy Spirit has called us to, I'm just believing that we will have even more and more miracle stories that we could tell. But I want to highlight to you today the difference between an odyssey and a journey. You know, when I first started thinking about this series, I was like, oh, okay, journey of prayer. The Holy Spirit said, no, odyssey. And when he said that, I wondered, okay, is there a difference? And yes, there is. A journey, I can take a journey to Cannon Beach, and it may or may not be adventurous, and it may or may not take a long time, depends on the traffic, right? Still a journey. But an odyssey is typically a long, sometimes a very long, and eventful or adventurous journey or experience. There's a little bit of a delineation there. So when the Holy Spirit said Odyssey, of course, what came to mind was Homer's Odyssey. So I actually bought the book. I'd never read the story before. I'd heard just little snippets of it, but I'd never actually read it. And it just, in my grandmotherly opinion, I'm not necessarily recommending this book for anybody young or children. It's not explicit. It's not explicit. If you want to read classic literature to them, go ahead. The themes are a little bit adult. That's just a fair warning, just fair disclaimer, okay? But an Odyssey is an epic poem. So Homer's Odyssey is an epic poem, and epic poems have some very distinct characteristics. They're a little different, kind of like an autobiography is going to be different than a nonfiction book. So an epic poem was considered at the time that Homer wrote it to be done in oral tradition. They were bards who would go into the homes of wealthy people who would be hosting landowners, politicians, aristocrats, nobles, and they would bring these bards in to entertain them in the evenings. So it's so interesting that, like, Homer's Odyssey was written in 7 or 8 BC. It has lasted for hundreds of years. Why? How does a piece of literature last that long? Well, there are some key themes in an epic poem that I think you and I need to pay attention to, because these epic poems prove that humans are drawn to stories where there's, number one, supernatural intervention, number two, there are miracles, and there's adversity. Ever sat in a movie where there's no conflict? Yeah, that's a brick. Just get out, okay? But it's where all of these things, supernatural intervention, miracles, and adversity, meet real humans. And over the next few posts, we are going to be drawing some parallels. But I want to start by giving you some key characteristics of an empty poem. An epic poem. Holy cow. All right. Number one, there's a larger-than-life hero. The protagonist is typically a figure of noble or divine descent who possesses superhuman strength, courage, and a very strict moral code, which I thought was so interesting. Now, when you were born of flesh, obviously. In John 3, Jesus explains to Nicodemus that you must be born again. If you're going to walk a spiritual life, if you're going to have spiritual understanding, then you got to be born again. You have to be born of the Spirit. 1 Corinthians 3:3. Paul is writing to a group of people who have been, or they claim to have been, born of the Spirit. But then his indictment to them is, you're acting like mere humans. Okay? You and I are not mere humans. We have the Holy Spirit alive and dwelling in us. We can draw from a well that very few others can draw. That gives us a superhuman strength, a superhuman wisdom, so to speak. Okay, you may not like that definition, but you know what? We have a perspective that a lot of people in the world don't have. We need to draw on that. Okay, that's characteristic number one. Characteristic number two is that there is always a vast setting. The journey is immense. It typically spans nations, even the globe, and often into cosmic realms. Okay, think of, if you're an Avenger fan, the end game. That battle happened on a cosmic level. All right. And you and I, we don't war against flesh and blood, right? But against powers, principalities, and rulers of darkness. Number three, there's always supernatural intervention. In the epic poem, right? In an epic poem, the protagonist is often either intercepted or he is assisted by gods, demons, angels, magical creatures. They're always active in his quest. Okay, number 4, there is always an invocation on the part of the muse for superhuman strength or divine unction to tell the massive story. And number 5, the poem is always written in medias res. Now, in medias res is a Latin phrase that means in the middle of the story. The narrative typically drops the middle, kind of in the middle of the action, but then retells the earlier part of the story through flashbacks. Very interesting. Very interesting that this is one characteristic, and I want to kind of sit on that for a little bit right now. Your story did not begin at your birth. Your part of the story began there, but you were dropped into a much larger narrative. Your assignment, your destiny, your calling was being developed, and you were being set up long before your feet hit the planet, right? And I want to point you to Hebrews 11:40, and I'm going to read it to you because I want to make sure I get this, and I'm sorry, I have to find it on my phone. All right. Now, Hebrews 11, of course, as you know, is the Hall of Faith. And the Hall of Faith is all about heroes who experienced great triumph and also great tragedy in their life. But it wasn't just for them. It wasn't just for their generation. Just like you and I. We don't live just for us, and we don't live just for our generation. We have generations that follow us that are depending on us to be faithful in our assignment. Verse 39 says this, and all of these, though they won divine approval by means of their faith, did not receive what was promised. Because God had us in mind. He had you and I in mind and had something better and greater in view for us, so that these heroes and heroines of faith should not come to perfection apart from us. And 1 Peter tells us something very similar. I'm going to read it off of this as well. He says, it was revealed to the prophets that they were not serving themselves, but you. And in these things which now have been announced to you, to those who preached the gospel by the Holy Spirit. You and I are called to have a massive effect. And we talked in the first video, we talked about history belongs to the intercessors. That time you spend on your knees, that time you spend prayer walking, that time you spend, serving and interceding for those around you and praying to the person next to you, right? You don't know what you're affecting. Your scope in that prayer could be vast, and only eternity will tell. So listen, you were created for eternity. You were created to have an assignment. We're going to keep moving along in our Odyssey of prayer. I invite you to join me again. If you want to catch up on the videos that I've done so far, go to my YouTube channel. I will link it below. And I will see you on the next video. Talk soon.